Hey, good morning, guys, and welcome to today's midweek message. Man, we're so excited. We're just a few short weeks away from the relaunch of the Water's Edge. So stay tuned to all of our social media pages for all the latest information on relaunch weekend. We're so excited that you're joining us today, but if you're looking for more ways to partner with the church, there's 4 simple ways to do so. The first way is you can give online. You can visit watersedgegathering.com and click on giving. From there, you'll be led to eGive, our online giving platform. Or you can text to give. You can text or give to 337-223-9003. From there, you can enter your dollar amount, and then you'll be led to on-screen instructions. Or you can give within the church app. Make sure to go to your app store or wherever you get apps from and look for the church app. It'll be a white icon with a gray cross. And from within the church app, search Water's Edge Gathering. From there, click Give, and you can give your tithes and offerings. Or you can give by mail. You can do so by mailing Water's Edge Gathering at P.O. Box 572, Lake Charles, Louisiana 70602, or Water's Edge Gathering at 2760 Power Center Parkway, Lake Charles, Louisiana 70607. We love you so much, and I'll enjoy today's message from Pastor Tony.
What's up, everybody? Hope you're having a good Wednesday morning. Thank you so much for tuning in. Just to give you a bit of an update, we are quickly approaching our relaunch date, July 25th and 26th, Eastern July. And we're still in phase 2. Maybe by then we'll be moving into phase 3. Who knows? If we stay in phase 2, then we'll probably be adding a midweek service that'll be identical to the weekend services, just for options. Keep in mind that at any of our services, we're not going to have nursery or pre-K or anything like that. So they'll all be family services. But just stay tuned. And so if we move into phase 3, then we'll just keep our 3 weekend services, Saturday at 6, and then our 2 Sunday morning services. But if we stay in phase 2, then we'll be adding a midweek service that, again, the message will be identical to the weekend services. And the service will probably be more geared towards students and our young adults as far as the atmosphere and everything. But the message will be the same, so you'll have options. And then the videos that I've been posting during the week, the Mondays are for leaders videos, and my Monday morning Wednesday Bible teaching videos. I'm going to continue to post those, but I'm going to move those to just twice a month. As we're getting ready to reopen and start having services and multiple services, we're going to have a lot of work that we have to do. So once a month I'll be posting a leadership video, and then once a month I'll be posting a Wednesday morning Bible teaching video. And if somehow during the week I have more time and the week opens up, then we'll record some more and pump out some more. But from now on going forward, as we approach our relaunch date, there'll be a once-a-month leadership video and a once-a-month Wednesday morning Bible teaching video. And we're going to continue to put out every single week, every single Sunday, our Sunday morning online experiences, our worship experiences. We're going to continue to do that even when we open back up full swing. We're still going to have those live Sunday morning online worship experiences. And so if you're out of town, or if you've moved out of state, if you live out of state, if you consider us your church, but you tune in online every weekend because you don't live anywhere close, we're going to continue to have those services online for you. For those of you who still feel unsafe right now getting out in public, we're still going to have those services every single Sunday morning for you. And the services that you watch online will be the same exact messages and the same exact services that we're going to have at our church facility live with everyone there. And so you're not going to miss anything. Should be really, really cool. But going online through the whole pandemic shutdown really taught us a lot. And we're able to reach so many more people and stay connected with so many more people. And so many of you love the online worship experience because you don't live close, or sometimes you just can't make it. So we're going to continue to do that every single week, every single Sunday morning, from here on out until forever. So it'll be cool. So you can stay plugged in with us live, in person, or online. For those of you who are continuing to give and support us financially, thank you so much for that. We have given away a ton of food this week, We're continuing to serve people. You're helping us keep our bills paid and all that kind of good stuff. And so thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. My son, Jagger, he's in athletics, man. He's in the sports. He likes to play basketball and football and baseball. And the other day I was at one of his baseball games, and he was having a good game, but he messed up just on one certain play. And when he went back to the dugout, it was time for the game to pretty much be over, and I was going to head out early so I could beat the traffic. And I went to tell him bye at the dugout, and I could tell that he had tears in his eyes. And so I had to tell him, I said, hey, buddy, I said, don't ever be disappointed in yourself because of what you're thinking that I may be thinking, not because of me. I said, Daddy's not here to evaluate you. Daddy's not here to correct you. Daddy's not here to drive you to be something that I never was as an athlete. I said, Daddy is just here to support you, just here to make memories with you. I said, nothing else. But it reminded me of how so many athletes that I know, I was an athlete growing up, you have this mentality in you, you have this passion in you to represent your name. If your last name is Bork and you had other athletes in your family, then man, you want to rep that name. You want to rep your family. If you go to a certain high school and that certain high school has some sort of legacy, then you want to rep that legacy. You want to rep that name. You want to rep your city. You want to rep your community. You just want to be a good representation of your family name, and who you're playing for. So there's a passion inside of every athlete to do that, to succeed and to honor your name, or to honor the school, or to honor the community. But as an athlete, you have that pride in you. Well, back in Bible days, back when Jesus was here, and after Jesus had left, and his early disciples, his first disciples, went out into a world controlled by Rome to start more churches that made more disciples of Jesus Christ. In between Ephesus and Antioch was a city called Aphrodisias. It was a grand Roman city, man. It was filled with the gates, and it was filled with the wealth and the richness of it. It was just this grand Roman city. There was rich, there was wealth, and there was proud representatives. This place was a proud representative of Rome and the Empire of Rome and the Roman Caesar, who by that time, the Roman emperors, the Roman Caesars, believed that they were gods. In fact, they believed that they were sons of gods. In fact, when a Roman Caesar would die, they believed if you looked up at the sky, you could see a comet, a shooting star shooting across the sky, and that was them going to be with whoever their deity was, that was their parents, their father, because they were sons of God. And so they thought that they were taking their place in the heavens as they died, and you looked up and saw a comet or a shooting star. And so a lot of these cities were just proud representations of Rome and the Roman Empire. And in this city, Aphrodisias, there was this massive arena, the Colosseum. It wasn't the Colosseum, but it was sort of a miniature Colosseum. In this certain arena, in this certain Colosseum, they could seat 30 to 40,000 people. Could you imagine that over 2,000 years ago with no sound system whatsoever? No video, nothing like that, no screens to watch, and they would pack 40,000 people into an arena to watch athletic games. And so this is what they did. And in arenas like this, the Roman would host games, Olympic games, races, chariot races, combat contests, the gladiator games, the Olympic games. And so the first disciples and the early church disciples came after the very first disciples. And the early church disciples were discipled by the very first disciples, the 12 that Jesus discipled. And so the early church disciples went out into a world that was not controlled by the Jews or the Jewish religion anymore. Now they went out to a world that was Roman and Greek controlled. And so it was a very much different world. And these early church disciples that were followers of Jesus Christ, they would have been very familiar with these arenas and these arena games. There was another huge arena in Caesarea, and that was in the area of Israel. And there was also a huge other arena that was a little bit smaller than those other ones near Nazareth. And so Jesus and his early disciples and these early church disciples would have been very familiar with these massive arenas. So here's the question. When Jesus called his first disciples, Matthew, James, John, Peter, Andrew, when Jesus called these first disciples, they knew that their model for passion, their model for being focused, their model for intensity, their model for being on fire for God was the prophet Elijah. I mean, here's the prophet in the Old Testament that was so filled with passion for God that he took on the prophets of Baal by himself. He called down fire from heaven. He prayed and he was a seeker of God, and he was just a symbol of running for God and racing for God and intensity for God and passion for God and love for God and worship for God. So the very first disciples of Jesus, their model for passion, their example for intensity and focus and seeking God and running your race for God to the most intense way possible was the prophet Elijah. Notice what it says in James chapter 5, verses 17 through 18, and I'm reading out of the New Living Translation. Notice what James, the half-brother of Jesus, says. Elijah was as human as we are, and yet when he prayed earnestly that no rain would fall, no rain fell for 3.5 years. Then when he prayed again, the sky sent down rain and the earth began to yield its crops. And so it says that Elijah was a man just like us, but when he prayed for it not to rain, it didn't rain. And when he prayed for the rain to finally come back, the rain finally came back. And so he had passions just like us, but he was a man full of passion and full of focus and full of intensity for God. And so these very first disciples of Jesus, their example, their model of passion and intensity for their race with God and their relationship with Jesus Christ always went back to the Old Testament example of the prophet Elijah. Have passion like the prophet Elijah. Pray like the prophet Elijah. Love God like the prophet Elijah. Be bold like the prophet Elijah. Don't be afraid to be bold for your faith like the prophet Elijah. And so this was their example of passion and focus and intensity. But these early church disciples that went out into the world controlled by Rome after Jesus had lived and died and rose from the dead and ascended back to heaven, they were going into a very Gentile, pagan-controlled world who knew nothing about Elijah. They knew nothing about the Jewish religion. They knew nothing about the Old Testament law, the Torah, the Pentateuch, the prophets. They knew nothing. And so how are these early church disciples going to relate this example of passion and intensity and boldness and focus in your relationship with God to a bunch of new Gentile believers who knew nothing of these Old Testament stories? And the prophet Elijah was not familiar to them at all. It seems like the early church leaders got their examples of passion, focus, devotion, and fire from the athletic arena, from the athletes, from the Colosseum games. Now back then, the purpose of sport, back then in the days of Jesus and right after, the purpose of sport was not just for the athlete. It was not just for competition, and it was not just for the fans to watch. But think of it like this. When LSU plays for a national championship, they're not only playing for the individual athletes, they're not only playing for their coach, they're not only playing for their school, LSU, they're not only playing for Baton Rouge, but they know that they're playing for Louisiana. When LSU plays for a bowl game, when they play in the national championship, they absolutely know that they're just not repping Baton Rouge. They're just not repping LSU. They're just not repping the individual players or the coaches. They're repping Louisiana. And so there's something bigger going on. There's a bigger name for them to rep through their passion and through their hard work and through their games and through their success and victory and through their fighting on the field. Our Olympic athletes not only compete for them and not only compete for the fans, but they compete for our country. They compete for whatever country they're from. That's the country they compete for. So back then, these athletes that would step into the Colosseum would also be representations of the Roman government, the Roman Empire, and the Roman Caesar, the Roman emperor, who claimed to be a god. And these games would begin. Anytime they had these games in a Colosseum, in an arena, these games would begin with the entrance of the Roman emperor, all decorated in Roman soldier wear. Man, just shining, capes, shields, all that stuff. And so the Roman emperor, the Caesar, would enter the Colosseum to this grand spectacle. Here he is, and we're fighting for his name. And we're fighting because he's a god. We're fighting for our God, and we're fighting for our country, and we're competing. We're competing for the Roman Empire and for the name of Rome. And so they did it with passions. And so when these athletes ran, when they had a race, when they had gladiator battles, they didn't just do it for the sweet taste of victory. They did it for the Roman Empire, for the Roman Caesar, for their God, and for their country. And so the early disciples who were trying to teach these new Jesus followers to live with passion, to worship with passion, to pray with excitement and focus and being intentional, and to love with passion so the world could see that Jesus is God, they used these games as the perfect example of fighting. They used these games as the perfect example of passion, focus, devotion, and intensity. You're running a race, but you're not just running to run. You're running a race, but you're not just running to complete the race. You're running in a race, and you're running that race so you can win the race, but you're also representing a name. And for them, for the early disciples, it wasn't the name of Rome or the Roman emperor. It was the name of God. It was the name of Jesus. Notice what the author of Hebrews says in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 2 out of the New Living Translation. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, our God, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and now he's seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. In other words, we're running and we're training with passion and devotion and fire. We're racing and we're serving with passion, devotion, and fire. We're praying and we're worshiping with passion, devotion, and fire. We are loving and we are feeding with passion, devotion, and fire. And we are seeking God first, and we are putting his kingdom first with passion and devotion and fire. Why? Not just for us, not just for our hearts, not just for our faith, but we want to show the world that we're running this race for something bigger than us. We want this world to know that Jesus Christ is God, and that Jesus Christ is alive, and that Jesus Christ is the name above all names. In everything we do, in word or deed, we do all to glorify and lift up the precious name of Jesus Christ. So you have a race to run today. You have things to do for your God. Run that race with intensity, passion, and fire, because you represent a bigger name than your own name. You represent the name of Jesus. Thank you so much for tuning in. We love you. We hope you have a great week.